Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Beast in the Woods, Big Teddy G. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin survival. A young boy with green hair woke up in the middle of the woods with a headache. Izuku with a groggy head, sat up and looked around. He was immediately scared of what he found, tall trees and nothing else. No sign of people, no sign of a trail, and no sign of his mom. That last thought brings him to a halt, his mother. The last thing he remembers is his mother taking him on a drive into the woods. It was a few days after his doctor's appointment that sealed his fate. His mother was eerily quiet and Izuku felt unease seep into his being. He asked a few times where they were going but never got a response. She pulled to the side on a long stretch of road next to a forest. He had asked again but was told to shut up. This didn't have to happen if you had a quirk. I can't lose everything I have because of your status. Izuku was scared of the look in his usually kind mother's eyes. I'm sorry, what? That's all he got out as his mother put a cloth over his mouth and he lost consciousness. Inko Midoriya walked through the woods after a long hike, alone. She got back into her car and drove home to pack up and leave for greener pastures. Izuku was left in the woods with nothing but the clothes on his back. After he remembered, Izuku began to sob alone in the woods with no one to hear. He clutched his knees to his chest and cried until he fell back into unconsciousness. Izuku later awoke with a chill in the air. He slowly got up and sniffled again before thinking of what to do next. He watched exactly one episode of Wild Survival on TV. He needed shelter before it got dark, the sun was already setting. He got up and began to walk in a direction, they all looked the same to him. The area he walked was densely wooded with brush everywhere. For his short frame, it was extremely daunting, but what choice did he have? He walked and walked lost in thought until he heard something, water burbling. He headed to the noise and found a small stream where he leaned down and drank the fresh water. He began to walk up steam since he didn't know what else he could do. With his arms clutched to his body, he walked for an hour until he found where the water came from. A natural spring source that washed over the stones beneath it. The source was a few feet up in the air on a stone wall and the small cliffside stretched far. Izuku looked around and found what he was looking for. A cave that stretched into the cliffside. He approached it with much apprehension and peeked inside the dark opening. He listened carefully. He saw and heard nothing. He looked up and it was close to dark. With no other choice he walked into the cave and it stretched up slightly at an angle. There was nothing in the cave as he could tell and was smaller than his room. There was moss covering the back wall and floor. Izuku made his way over and sat down in the dark. He had acknowledged that his mother left him in the woods to die because he is quirkless. More tears leaked out and he wiped them away as he tried to think something useful. Unless someone saw his mother do this to him, no one would know. Heroes wouldn't know where to search. Kaken might ask where he was, but if his mother said we moved, why wouldn't they believe her? There were no trails as he walked in the forest, no sign of human life. He was truly alone with no one coming for him. He was scared and so came the tears again. Izuku woke up the next day with tear stains on his cheeks and in the dark. He could see the light streaming into the cave opening and Izuku made his way out. He sat again at the opening and tried to think what next. He needed to eat and there was a stream nearby. He remembered the show and thought about how he speared fish to eat. Izuku looked around and found a long stick. It was dull at the end and too wavy. He kept looking until he found a straight stick with a dull end. He moved to a flat stone and started to sharpen it as the guy said on the TV. He said to use your knife or a hard stone. He didn't have a knife, so this will do. He kept going until the point was sharp and then he made his way to the stream. He took off his shoes and socks and then walked into the stream. He walked slowly in the cool stream until he saw some fish swimming around and stopped. He tried his luck for hours and hours until he finally speared a fish hard enough to catch it. With tears of joy, he pulled the fish up on the stick and walked back to the cave. Now he needed to prepare it. He vaguely remembered that they took its guts out. Still no knife and a rumbling stomach. He looked around for something. A pointy stone caught his eye and he picked it up. He sat down and looked at the dead fish and then the stone. He reminded himself that he still needs to cook it, and tears of frustration leaked out of his eyes. He was angry at his mother for leaving him, at the doctor saying he was quirkless, and at himself for being quirkless. His stomach reminded him that he couldn't waste time, and he swiped tears away to focus on the fish. With a mess, he pulled out the stuff in its belly and threw it away. He cleaned it as much as he could in the river and used the sharp stone to scrape the scales as much as he could. Then he moved to the cave opening and set the fish on the spear. He set it against the cave wall and began on the fire. The area was dry and he found enough stuff to make a fire. He found dry grass and leaves with sticks to rub together. He knows if stuff rubs together fast enough, it gets hot and then the fire starts. So he sat with a bunch of sticks, bark, and dry leaves to burn. He moved the sticks around until he found a way to spin the tip of the stick on the bark and began to do his best. Hours passed as he got close to starting a fire with small streams of smoke coming out, but his young body couldn't manage. Tired and hungry, he looked to the sky and it was beginning to darken again. He looked at the fish still on the stick and grabbed it. He looked at it and his stomach rumbled again. With tears, he bit into the raw fish and chewed. He didn't stop to think of the taste or the possible consequences of eating raw food. He was too hungry and didn't care as he devoured the fish. 15 minutes later, he was washing his mouth with water and his hands. He felt satisfied at the quenched hunger. With that, he made his way to the cave moss and lay down for the night. 2 years passed as Izuku struggled to survive. He figured out how to make a fire and finally could eat cooked fish. He hadn't gotten sick from the times he ate it raw, and he was grateful the river was clean. The fire took his shoelaces and 2 sticks to spin fast enough to gain the heat to start an ember. With excitement, he gently set some dry leaves and blew on them until flames sprung up. He set sticks and then he had a fire. He danced around it with joy and he looked at his fire started with pride. During the 2 years, he looked around his cave to find different foods to eat and found many things. The only problem was trying to figure out what was edible. He spotted a squirrel eating a berry from a bush and that gave him the idea of following their lead. Any roots he found, he set out for animals to eat. If they didn't, he didn't. If they ate it all, he ate it. He was a genius, he complimented himself. He thought of hunting animals for some meat, but he didn't have any idea how to catch one. So he stuck with fish and whatever he could forage. The first winter was hard with him going to sleep shivering most nights. He learned quickly to close off the cave opening with a shrubbery. The next year he made a makeshift door to set it in front of the opening. Made of sticks and vines, it blocked the cold well. The fire gave him warmth in the cold. His clothes shrunk on his body and his shoes grew tight. He worked with what he had and tore open the front of the shoes to make some open-toe shoes. His shirt and shorts stayed on until he couldn't wear them properly. When his shorts were too uncomfortable, he tied his shirt to cover himself as best as he could. He ranged further out with each passing week to find anything, but so far he had found no sign of people. His sense of direction improved drastically as he lived in the woods. He found many neat things like deer, a black glassy stone, and a wolf. He quickly moved away from that area and hoped that no wolves moved close to him. As for the black stone, it was incredibly sharp and managed to cut his calluses finger. He smiled at the find and set his sharp stone to rest as a new stone took its place. First, he needed to make it possible for him to hold it to gut the fish. He used his old shorts as a grip and it worked extremely well. In year 2 is when the trouble began. Izuku was foraging for berries in spring and he heard a noise. Living in the woods heightened his senses, so he turned slowly to face whatever made the noise. A gray wolf stared at him and growled while lowering its body. Izuku was scared out of his mind and moved back slowly while reaching for his black stone knife. The wolf continued to growl and moved with every step Izuku took back. The boy didn't make a noise as he continued to step back into his cave. Maybe he could hide there until it grew tired, but Izuku didn't have that luxury. With a bark, the wolf lunged at his neck. Izuku yelped and dove to the side and began to run to the cliff top of his cave. He had climbed the cliff and ran to it. The wolf barked as Izuku ran between trees and dodged its lunges. The cliff came in the line of sight and Izuku cried in joy. The wolf tackled him and they fell off the cliff. Izuku landed in the creek and felt pain shoot up his leg as he landed under it. He pulled himself out of the creek and looked for the wolf. It landed near his cave and whined as it got up. The wolf turned to him and growled while approaching with a limp back leg and wheezing breath. Izuku grabbed his black stone knife and aimed it at the wolf. Izuku couldn't stand with his leg broken and the wolf was right on him. It lunged and Izuku put his arm up. The canine bit into the 7-year-old's forearm and shook. Izuku cried in pain and jabbed his sharp stone into its neck over and over again. The wolf whined in pain just like Izuku, but it didn't let go. With a yell, Izuku stabbed its eye and it releases his mangled arm. Izuku didn't let up and jumped on the wolf and continued to stab it in the neck until its whining stopped and he couldn't breathe anymore. The boy stumbled back from the bloody mess and landed on his butt. He moved away from the dead wolf and leaned against one of his trees. He shakily looked down at his arm and leg. The bone in his leg was sticking out and the arm was torn up to shreds. He turned and threw up at the sight of his body mangled. He cried as the adrenaline wore off and the pain came. "I don't want to die," he cried to himself as darkness took him over. A few hours later, Izuku woke up to see his limbs healed and he was very hungry. His shirt tied around his waist and the dead wolf proved otherwise. His leg was the same. His eyes snapped around to see if anyone was near, but he couldn't hear anything other than the normal wildlife. Izuku stared at his arm and absorbed what just had happened. "I have a quirk," he said quietly and tears streamed down his eyes. "I wasn't quirkless," he angrily said and thought of his mother who had abandoned him. "I have a quirk," he cried with joy at the development. His stomach grumbled loudly and he turned to the wolf. It would only be fair, he thought as he grabbed his fire starter and began making a fire. Looked at the fur and then down at his too small shirt covering his modesty. With the fire roaring, he began skinning the wolf. With no prior experience. He dumped the innards far from his cave and began to break bones and cut a piece to skewer to begin to cook. The smell was divine to his nose. For 2 years, all he ate was fish, berries, and some roots that he had no name for. When one piece finished cooking he ate it and put another one in its place. While he didn't want to waste food, he knew that the meat would spoil if he didn't eat it. So he ate his fill and ate some more. All that was left was half a wolf and its chewed-on bones. With a full stomach, he cooked more meat for later and set it on large leaves he had found and set them in his cave. The rest of the raw meat was dragged away from the river and put into a pit and covered up with shrubbery. He knows a dedicated animal would find it but better than nothing. He set the wolf's skin up to dry and hopes it worked out. With the setting sun, he went into his moss bed and lay down to sleep with a full belly for the first time in 2 years. He woke the next morning and stretched. He ate what he had cooked and began to cook the rest of the raw meat. With that done, he sat down and thought about what he had discovered yesterday. He had a quirk. He healed yesterday from lethal wounds. Now to figure out what his quirk is. Yesterday he ate a breakfast of berries so he shouldn't have been hungry, but when he woke after the fight he was starving and it was the same day. Maybe fast healing and it uses what I have to heal. Izuku thought out loud. He took his black stone knife and cut his finger. It bled and it didn't close like he expected it to. Heal. And slowly it closed up. I have to tell it to heal. Oh. Can I do other things? Stop healing. His finger stopped healing. Bled. He washed off at the stream and tried new things with his quirk. He remembered the sharp teeth on the wolf and said, "Grow sharp fangs." Pain bloomed in his mouth as new teeth grew over the teeth that were there. Once the pain stopped, he touched his teeth and found fangs like the wolf's where his canine used to be. So cool. Alright, go back. Pain bloomed again in his mouth and he cried in pain. Once the pain was gone, so were his teeth. That hurt. Stop hurting. He ordered and his body went numb. He didn't like it. Go back. He bit his tongue without realizing it and he healed it. Okay, are you alive? If you are, give me a sign. Nothing happened, he hummed in thought. Numb my right hand and make sharp claws. His right hand numbed, but both hands grew sharp claws made of bone extending out of his fingers. Ouch. He looked at the sharp knife-like blades on each finger. They stretched out almost 2 inches from his tips of his fingers. He dragged one across a stick and it was carved easily. Whoa, go back. His left still shot in pain while his right was still numb. He had to work on that. He learned that he could change his body however he liked in the most horrifying ways. He had grown to command his body to without saying a word and grown used to the pain. Bigger changes hurt more and made him hungry if he kept them. In short term, it was fine. His quirk used his body to fuel the change. He wanted to do more with his quirk but he didn't know enough. He remembered about a library and how they had books and books had knowledge, but where to find it. So one day, 6 months after finding his quirk, he set off to find people and then a library. He didn't have much to carry except his black stone knife and a new wolf skin he had around his waist. The first one didn't work out. So after much studying of the deer he killed, he learned how it could run so fast. He mimicked how the leg was formed and did his best to walk and then run on it. His hoofs were made of the stuff his nails were made of and he felt fast. With some cooked food in his makeshift basket, he ran downstream fast as a deer. Wind blew through his hair and he laughed in ecstasy. He passed ponds, another cave, and so many trees. He took a few days at full speed but he didn't stop unless it was to rest or sleep. He hunted small animals when he ran out of food with a spear of bone that protruded from his forearm. He grew sharp teeth and turned off his taste and ate whatever he caught raw. He could make permanent changes like making sure he didn't get sick, so he did so. He knew he could get sick from small bugs called germs, but he just told his body not to get sick and so far it had worked. After cleaning off he moved on until he saw what he was looking for. Lights in the distance, he ran faster and in the dark he found building made by man. He stood huffing in breath next to a tree as he saw a city street with building next to them. He listened to the noise and backed away from it all. The smell was different and it was so loud in comparison to the deep woods. He was scared of leaving the woods and that made Izuku laugh just a bit. He didn't know where to go or if there was a library anywhere near here. He looked down at his wolf pelt covering his waist and dirty arms and legs. He would need to clean up and get clothes. He looked around at the near homes and saw some clothes set out on to dry. Just a few clothes would be okay, right? So he sprinted over the fence and snatched what looked like a shirt and shorts and then sprinted back. Back in the woods, he looked at the clothes and they were just a size too big but he could make it work, shorts were fine. He went back to the pond and cleaned up as much as he could. He left his legs as they were since he forgot about shoes. His hair was a bit greasy but it would be fine. He slipped on his stolen clothes and made his way back into the dark city. It would be better to look around now when there were no people. So with a shaking step he walked into the dark city. Improvements. Izuku walked through the streets lit up by the occasional street light. His hoofs were loud in the empty streets and he changed them into wolf legs with the pads instead. He looked at the building as he passed down the street in the middle of the night. He remembered to stay on the sidewalk as he walked but he couldn't find any libraries. He heard something in the next alleyway and peeked around the corner. A man stood there with a cigarette against the brick wall. Izuku tried to speak but coughed and tried again. "Hello, do you know where a library is?" The man turned to the boy with hairless wolf legs and furrowed his brow. "Give me some money and I'll tell you." "Sorry, I don't have any money. Izuku shook his head. The man approached and grabbed his collar but stopped when he felt something jabbing his stomach. He looked down to see a bone spear pointed straight at him. Do you know where a library is? The boy asked again. The man didn't move from his position and nodded carefully. Great. Can you show me? The man nodded again. Okay, lead the way. Izuku stepped back and the man slowly walked around the boy with a bone spear coming out of his wrist and with eyes that weren't afraid of hurting someone. The would-be thug walked straight to the nearest library and pointed at it. It says it opens at 7 a.m. Izuku smiled brightly and retracted his bone spear with a cracking noise. The opening from the spear closed right after. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye now. He turned to the woods and walked straight into them and disappeared. The man nodded his head and began to walk home without even trying to rationalize what just had happened. Izuku found what he was looking for and made his way back into the woods. He followed his sense of direction and found the stream and followed it until he found the pond and then the cave nearby. It was a nest for some badgers, but Izuku killed them and saved them for breakfast. He took off his clothes and set them to the side so they didn't get dirty. With a content sigh, he fell asleep. The next morning, he gutted the badgers and ate 2 of them, and saved the other 2 for later in the den. He washed up in the pond and cleaned again before heading to the library. The sun was out and people were walking around and so were cars. Izuku felt overwhelmed by everything but did his best to push on. He got a few curious looks but nothing major as he walked to the library and stepped into it. He looked around and took the smell. It was very quiet compared to the forest and the city. He heard someone clear their throat and Izuku looked over to see an old lady watching him curiously. Don't forget to wipe your feet before you enter, she said softly. Izuku looked down and nodded. He cleaned his paws on the rug and made his way to the old lady. I'm looking for books about the human body. He paused. And other kinds of bodies like animals, like bones and stuff. The old librarian observed the young boy that could only set his chin on the counter and asked about anatomy books. His hair was wild and his eyes were little better. All right, follow me. She guided him to a section for high school and moved past it to stuff his age. Here we are. Izuku looked at the books and grabbed a few that he could barely read. Thanks. He sat at one of the tables and opened the first book and barely could read what the more advanced book had written. He flipped through the book until he found a page on the anatomy of the human body. He turned to the male body and tried to understand what he was reading. He was sounding a word but couldn't. That says pancreas. Izuku had heard the old lady was nearby so wasn't startled when she spoke. He repeated how she had said it. She sat next to him and watched him for another moment before speaking. When is the last time you went to school? She asked softly. Izuku stopped and thought about the question and answer. I think 2 years ago, a bit more. He said and turned back to the book. Why is that? She pushed. Why are you asking? He turned back to the old lady and stared back. Because you should be able to read this without much issue but you don't look malnourished. So you have been fed well but why don't you go to school? She stated what she has seen of the boy. I've just got back so I'm behind in school. He shrugged, not seeing the issue. Do you wish to learn? She asked softly. Yes. His eyes shone with the goal he was searching for. Learn how to read better, then learn how to make his quirk work better, and then that's for later. Keep your voice down while in the library. Come on, I'll show you what you need to do to catch up. Even when she lectured him she was soft-spoken. Izuku followed her and she put him in front of a computer and brought up multiple tests for him to make. He scrunched up his nose but he did what she requested and began to answer question after question. She checked up on him every once in a while but he was fine on his own. Once done, he moved over to where she was reading a book and told her he was done. She printed off the results and read where he was academically. She then moved through the library and grabbed books from a few sections and handed them to Izuku. "Read these, and once you have understood them, come find me." She smiled softly at the strange boy. He worked for a few hours until his stomach rumbled. He got up and handed the books back to the old lady. "I'm not done yet, I'm going to eat and be back." With that, he ran out the door and to his den where the badgers waited. What an odd boy. The librarian said to herself, there was something not right with him. Izuku returned with a full belly to the library and took the books from the old lady and kept reading where he left off. Some people came in and left quietly, Izuku kept track of them all. The day passed like that until the old lady knocked on his table to get his attention. "It's time to close up for the night. I'll be open tomorrow at the same time and I'll hold on to the books if you like. Or you can check them out and continue reading." Izuku was tempted, but he had no source of light to read in his den. "Okay, I'll be back tomorrow to keep reading." He set the books on the counter like before lunch and left with a wave. Izuku jogged back to the woods in search of dinner. He knew he smelled some other animals nearby and would have to hunt quickly before the light vanished. He took off his clothes and such to his wolf pelt so they wouldn't get dirty. With that, he grew his claws and prowled the woods until he found what he was looking for. A deer grazed lazily in his line of sight and Izuku slowed down to catch it. He jumped onto a tree and climbed it before jumping onto another tree until he was right above his target. He leapt towards the deer and killed it quickly before it made a noise. Its head hanging by a thread as it fell under Izuku's weight. He grabbed it and began to skin and gut it immediately, away from his den. Once done, he began to make his way back to his den to cook up the meat. While he could eat it raw and it wouldn't be an issue, he liked to taste cooked meat every once in a while. Now dark, Izuku sat next to a fire with some deer meat cooking on a stick. He blew on it and chomped down on it. His bladed fingers made clean cuts on the meat, which means less mess. Once he ate about a third of the deer, he set the skin to dry after figuring out the right process and went to sleep with the deer dragged in with him. 1 year later, Izuku walked into the library and greeted Asato Shizuko. "Hello, Asato." He grabbed his books from yesterday and moved to his table. "Hello there, young Izuku," she said softly back to him. Izuku wore something different from 6 months ago since she had asked why he only wore one set of clothes. In response, Izuku went out at night and took a few more clothes like a sweater and a few more shirts and shorts. From different homes to make it fair. He kept them as clean as possible, but it was hard when he lived in the woods. She had been watching him closely as he came in every day without fail to study what she gives him. He had far passed what a boy his age should be at, but Asato didn't say anything. Sometimes he took breaks from his studies and instead read something he wanted to, like the anatomy books he wanted a year ago. Right now, he was reading about how the organs of a normal human stayed in place and what caused them to get injured in most situations. He understood what he needed to make his body even better, now he just needed some time alone. While he was at modifying his organs to survive more impact, he will take out the appendix, and the wisdom teeth. He moved on to bones and how to make them stronger. He found a book detailing quirked people that affected their bodies from birth. One of the most common was stronger bones for strength enchantment quirks. During an autopsy of one quirked human, their bone was 3 times as dense compared to a normal human. "Need any help, Izuku?" Asato asked softly. Izuku hummed and said, "No, I think I'm okay. Thank you, Asato." The next thing was muscles and ligaments. He was sure that he could compact the muscles in his body without getting bigger, just like some quirked people had, and the ligaments would follow the same route as the bones. If he eats the ligaments of others, then he could add them to his after breaking them down. "Are you planning to become a doctor?" Asato sat across from Izuku with her book. "Doctor is a profession that heals people." She nodded. "No, this is all for my quirk." "You never mention your quirk, may I ask what it is?" she carefully asked. Izuku shrugged and answered. "I can do whatever I want with my body." She stared confused at what he said. What do you mean? Let me show you. Izuku held his hand out and bones cracked and reformed into mallet-like fists made of bone and then cracked again and extended bone blades from his fingers. Then they shifted to turn into fleshy tendrils to turn the page in the book. Like that but everywhere. Asato looked disturbed at the display but was intrigued by the possibilities. And you want to study to make your body more efficient, better. Izuku nodded. To what end? I'm not sure but I want to find out what I could do. He said excited at the prospect. So long as you're careful and study exactly what you're thinking of doing. Asato smiled at the messy-haired boy. That night, Izuku began to crunch on the bones of what he had hunted that morning. He ordered his body to break down the calcium and compress his bones as much as they could. Tick suffered the same fate as they were sucked into his body as they latched on. The deer was consumed bit by bit after it was skinned and gutted. Nothing remained of the peaceful animal as Izuku improved his body. Bones grew denser, muscles compacted, ligaments strengthened, and organs became spongy to take impact better. The next day, Izuku felt different as he woke up. He felt his body with his quirk and could tell everything he wanted to be worked. He got out of his den and extended his bone spear and it was coated just thin iron from tip to end. He slashed at a tree and it carved deeply into it. He focused on making the iron coat the tip only but the iron only coated his bones. He would need more to make them thicker. His bladed fingers looked like actual blades with the gleam of metal coating them. He smiled at the improvement. While he felt heavier, the muscles were compacted to fix the discrepancy. He changed into his hunting form and walked forward to test his new body. With wolf legs, bladed fingers in one hand, and a bone spear in the other he ran through the forest for his breakfast. He sped faster than he did before and found his prey. A badger sniffing the ground turned to meet a claw that bisected it cleanly. Izuku grabbed the badger and skinned it before unhinging his jaw and eating it whole, while the other half was skinned and torn apart by extending tendrils made of muscle and bone. Each tendril took a piece and retracted into Izuku's body to be consumed. Izuku moved on to find more breakfast. He stopped next to a berry bush before leaving them alone. He learned quickly what was edible and what wasn't. He moved on and found what he was looking for: a deer. Izuku returned to the library with a hop on his step and took his books that are always set aside for him. With a smile to Asato, he sat to study for his academics. Later he could read on external organs of the human body like eyes, noses, and mouths. What he had wasn't a mouth but teeth on a tendril that sucked in mass to consume. He wanted to make another mouth that includes a tongue and taste buds. Eyes would be difficult but that's a problem for the future. 3.5 years later. Izuku walked back to his den. At 13 years old roughly, Izuku stood at 167 centimeters still with messy green hair and freckles. He is lean but the muscles were compacted enough to feel like steel when flexed and his bones were the equivalent of steel. He had come a long way from the scared boy left alone in the forest 9 years ago. He finished what was recommended for him and he had moved into animal anatomy and the anatomy of the human brain. With his brain, he only wanted one thing tweaked. A program said if he would get critically injured to heal by sacrificing his limbs first then his body. A safety measure in case he would lose consciousness and be too hurt to heal. As for animal anatomy, he mimicked many animals and insects to improve his transformations. Insects had many options for armor and also weapons. He even tried wings but he was too heavy for them to work. One animal that he grew fascinated by was a mantis shrimp. Both its eyes and way of attack were incredible to Izuku. He had learned how to grow mantis shrimp eyes and he loved to see the detail of the world around him. It took a long time to adjust to having another set of eyes but now he has the extra pair right above his normal ones. As for the arms of the creature, he could crack a tree in half with a single strike and cause the impact point of smoke. He had experimented with many types of animal anatomy but his favorite is definitely the mantis and mantis shrimp. Alongside good old claws and bone spear. His legs kept with the wolf for day-to-day and pronghorn legs for speed, they were faster. He had plans for his legs in case of heavy combat, but his wolf legs should be good considering that the bones are steel-lined. Eating charcoal for the carbon wasn't a fun process. Izuku changed into his hunting furs and breathed in the woods through a nose enchanted by multiple animals. His legs changed into more aggressive wolf legs with muscle exposed and steel claws for gripping. His arms extended halfway down his thighs and the muscles were exposed as the legs did with bone claws extending. His spine grew slightly more flexible like a feline. Finally, his face became monstrous. The mantis shrimp's eyes grew under his normal eyes and his lips pulled back to show interlocked teeth. Organic armor covered his nose, ridged spine, and the most delicate organs. He learned his mistake and once was enough. With a sigh of relief, he dug out the earth as his legs kicked under him and gained speed. He ran with the breeze through his hair and he sprinted through the woods and then leapt onto a tree and climbed it like with ease. His claws gouged into the tree trunk and his compressive muscles propelled the heavy boy up. He reached the top and leaned over with tendrils extending out of his back and wrapping around the tree top. He stood there and breathed every smell nearby. A new one caught his attention and he pivoted to its direction. The smell of a human boy his age approximately, and he smelled fear and desperation. More smells accosted his nose and it was more boys the same age but filled with malice and joy. Izuku growled and leapt off the tree top and landed with a loud boom. He sprinted full tilt at the smell of the scared boy and climbed a tree and jumped to another to see what was going on. He saw a purple-haired boy with something on his face running away from a group of 3 boys calling out behind the running boy. The purple-haired boy tripped and the others laughed at his misfortune. He could hear them calling the victim a villain and other names, but the hunter has seen enough. Shinso crawled away from his bullies as they approached him with mocking smiles. Just as they were in 10 steps of the crawling boy, he felt a loud thump land behind him. The bullies' faces went pale as sheets. The hunter stood behind the purple-haired boy as the others screamed and ran away from him. The boy on the ground turned around haltingly and his eyes widened in horror at what he saw. Izuku crouched down and observed the thing on the boy's face. It was a muzzle with a lock on its side. His claws hand outstretched and the boy flinched. Izuku ignored it and split his hand into tendrils with blades on their ends and sliced apart the leather straps. He gently pulled the thing off the boy and his clawed hand reformed around the muzzle. Shinso stared up at the monster as he crushed the muzzle in his hand and placed it in front of his legs gently. With a nod and huff, he turned around to leave. "Thank you." Izuku stopped at the boy's thanks and turned around. "Come back any time." Izuku changed his voice when he was in this form just for the fun of it, and it came out as a low growl with 10 voices overlapping to make it sound like a demon spoke. He moved over to a tree and marked it with 3 claw marks. The boy nodded and stayed there until Izuku left. Shinso let out a breath he didn't know he was holding and took the ball of scrap that once was the muzzle. He looked up at the claw marks and got up to feel how deep they were. If that thing wanted to, he could have torn all of them apart. But instead, he stopped the bullies from going further with no witnesses around. He still shivered at the 4-eyed beast with skinless legs and arms. The boy Izuku walked into the library to continue his research on the anatomy of living things he could assimilate into his body. He already modified the cavity around his brain to absorb an impact better. A net held Izuku's brain in place and prevents it from smashing against his cranium, which would cause brain injuries. His spinal cord was also strengthened and made more flexible. The big issue at the moment is his nervous system. While his body was as peak as it could get, his cabling needed something better. That's what he plans to study next. "Oh, Izuku, just who I was thinking about. Come here." Asato smiled softly and bade him come over to the counter. "What is it?" Izuku asked the librarian. "I am planning to take a vacation for 6 months starting next week. I've hired a temporary replacement for the time being," she explained. Izuku furrowed his brows and asked, "What's a vacation?" Asato smiled softly at the strange boy and answered, When someone takes a break from work for a long period. Oh. Alright. Just like how he takes breaks from hunting quietly instead, he hunts where deer can see him and he can run after them. You'll be back. She laughed softly. Yes, don't worry about that. Alright. Izuku nodded and took the book he left on the counter. Asato smiled at his odd behaviors as he sat down at his table. Izuku read about the nervous system and quirked humans and animals that had improved nervous systems. From what he understood, the nervous system was his brain and spine. He was thinking of the peripheral nervous system, which was the nerves, sensory neurons, and motor neurons. He wanted his peripheral nervous system able to move faster than it can now. Turns out it was simple to improve his nervous and peripheral nervous systems just by adding more neurons connecting to each limb. He had to be careful and not cross wires, so to speak, or else if he wanted to move a finger then the arm moved at the same thought. That was a simple fix as he dissolved the neurons connecting the two lines. He added more to his external organs like his eyes and nose. When he first grew his extra pair of eyes it was distorting to get input from both eyes. He had grown used to it and flipped between the two sets, but now with more neurons connecting both eyes, he could see out of both of them at the same time. While his mantis shrimp eyes were more narrowed in their focus, he used his normal eyes to see in a wider range. His nose didn't improve much. The week passed as Izuku began to slow in his research. Asato gave him a goodbye hug to his surprise and was gone the next day he came in. In her place was a young woman with nondescript features. She smiled and welcomed, but that was all. Izuku didn't pay much attention to her after that. During his time going back and forward between the library and the woods, he only encountered a hero once as he was walking to the library in the morning. A man with colorful clothes was walking down the sidewalk with his chest out. Izuku tilted his head as he observed the oddly dressed man. The hero caught his watching fan and approached him. "Hello there, young man. Shouldn't you be at school?" The colorfully dressed man said with a smile. "I don't go to school, I learn everything I need in the library," he answered. "Why are you dressed like that?" The hero paused at the question. "Because I am a professional hero." He looked confused at having to answer that. "Oh. Right. Heroes are like the police, but they can use quirks and dress up." Izuku remembers a faint memory of a blonde man with a weird hairdo. "Where are you from, young man?" The hero looked thoroughly confused at the interaction. "I grew up in Japan, I live near here." Izuku waited for the man to continue talking but looked trying to wrap his head around the idea of someone not knowing about heroes. Izuku didn't wait any longer and left the man standing there. "Hello, nice to see you again." The temporary librarian greeted him. Izuku walked up to the desk and asked, "What aisle contains information about heroes? What would you like to know?" "The agencies. The heroes. Its history." She walked around the desk and made her way to a bookshelf. "Agencies. What is that? Give me the basics of heroes first," he asked. The young woman looked at him curiously and nodded. She grabbed a book on the history of heroes and how they came to be. Most of this bookshelf is about heroes, that will tell you about the beginning of the heroes and how they came to be today. Izuku nodded his thanks and walked to his table. He read the book and then grabbed another and another. He read until it was time to close the library. The lady tapped his table to get his attention and Izuku got up and set his books on the counter for tomorrow. He was in deep thought about heroes. He turned to the temporary librarian. "So heroes protect people by using their quirks to fight villains who use their quirks to hurt people or that break the law?" She gave a curious nod. "How can someone become a professional hero?" They continued to walk to the exit as she turned off the lights. "Anyone who passes their tests. I know UA is the most famous with their entrance exam of fighting robots usually." She was confused at how the boy didn't know anything about heroes. She was prepped by Asato how he was odd but nothing to this degree. Izuku furrowed his brow and looked at her. That's it. Just fight some robots and you pass. Do they have another test to make sure they can be heroes? I'm not sure, maybe, but I'm not entirely sure. Why? She locked the door from the outside and turned to him as the sun began to set. Because even a pack of wolves could destroy some robots, it doesn't mean they should be heroes. He creased his brow in confusion at the way it was. She nodded and agreed with his statement. That's true, but that's why I'm planning on becoming a librarian and not a hero. She laughed softly. Do you want to be a hero? Izuku hummed in thought. It does seem fun, I'll think about it. While he was content in the woods. There was more in the world than just hunting and reading. Izuku walked back to the woods and thought of the idea of becoming a hero. He could fight villains and then he could get paid for it. He hadn't had much use for money in his life, so that was just a small benefit. Plus, it didn't mean he had to leave his woods to become a hero. Help protect people and then he could back to his den at night. He stopped when he smelled a familiar but foreign scent. It was from the boy he stopped from the other boys. He strpped and changed into his hunter form and leapt to a tree and followed his nose. He found the boy walking alone in the woods with a light in his hands, shining his way forward. Izuku observed the boy as he looked around with a nervous odor wafting to the hunter. He waited until the boy was under his tree and then dropped a few feet behind him. The boy yelped in fear as the hunter stood a few feet over him. The boy stepped back a few feet from the hunter, who watched him curiously. Shinso shook a little as he looked into the four eyes that stared at him. The beast's teeth were sharp and gleamed white as they locked perfectly in between each other, and green messy hair covered his top. Shinso gulped and nervously pulled out what he had in his sweater pocket. The hunter watched the boy nervously observe his changed form, and then he reached into his pocket. His eyes snapped to his hand and the boy froze at the moment. He looked back up at his face and tilted his head in curiosity. It's a thank you gift for what you did before. The boy stuttered and held out a box of cooked meat seasoned. The hunter split his hand into tendrils and gingerly picked up one of the skewed meats and brought it to his nose. The whiff he got stung his nose and he shook his head and then sneezed. He looked at the meat and the nervous smile of the boy. Izuku took a piece and chomped it down. Spicy, but good, Izuku said as the seasoned meat covered his tongue. For most of his life, he had plain meat and the seasoning was a kick to his senses. Shinso let out a sigh of relief as the beast ate the rest of the skewed meat. His stomach growled just a bit and he remembered that it was dinner time and he should be heading back to eat with his mother. You're hungry? The beast stated. Ah yeah, dinner should be soon, Shinso responded. Yes, it's time for a hunt. The beast picked up Shinso with his tendrils and held him close to his back as he disappeared from the clearing they were at. Wait. What are you doing? He felt panic rise as the beast strapped him to their back and they blurred to another clearing. Izuku set the purple-haired boy down and he collapsed. Izuku sniffed the air and bolted to where a badger was. He skinned it and gutted it with practiced ease and arrived back at his den just as the boy was beginning to get back up. He set the body of the badger on a branch and grabbed his fire starter to start a fire to cook dinner on. In the fire pit he made, tendrils grabbed tinder and sticks as smoke plumed out and a fire began. He added more and more until it was roaring. Shinso watched as the beast started the fire and built it up until it was to his satisfaction. And then he grabbed the body of the animal and sliced its legs off and stewed them. He set them to cook over the fire. With a pale face, Shinso sent a message to his mother that he was having dinner with a friend, and she responded with a smile face emoji. He winced at the sound of cracking bone and looked up to see the beast transformed into a boy. Near his age. The boy looked normal with green hair, freckles, and a muscled body. The only difference was a set of black dots under his eyes and his wolf legs. His waist was covered by a wolf pelt was the only article of clothing. You're human. The boy stated in confusion. Of course I am. Izuku spun the roast of badger. Why are you here? I live here. Izuku pointed behind him to the den. What? Why? Why what? Shinso pursed his lips at the frustration. Why are you living in the woods and not in the city or town or whatever? Izuku thought about his mother leaving him for dead in the woods. I don't have any money, he said instead. Shinso saw that pause and he could see the boy's eyes flash with resentment. He didn't push any further that line. My name is Shinso Hitoshi. Do you have a name? Izuku snorted and bit into the roast and nodded in satisfaction. Of course I do, I'm Izuku. Here, eat up. He handed one roast to Shinso. Shinso took the haunch of meat and gave a hesitant bite. It was tough and flavorless. Just Izuku. Izuku tore into the leg without issue and swallowed his meal down. Yes, just Izuku. Why were those others chasing you? They were bullies and they wanted to hurt me because of my quirk. People do that. That's weird. He reached the bone and crunched on it. Shinso stared at the bitten-off bone and then answered. Discrimination because of quirks, yes. How long have you been here, in the woods? My den, like 5 years. In the woods, longer. He finished his bone and moved on to the next roast. Oh, do you like it? Izuku nodded. It's okay, it's quiet and I get to hunt. He shrugged. Do you plan to stay here forever? Izuku paused at that and finished his mouthful. I was just thinking of that earlier. I was reading in the library about heroes and how they fight bad guys called villains and I thought maybe I would try to be a hero. Oh, that's nice. You read often. Every day, do you want to be a hero? Yeah, but it is going to be hard. Of course, it's going to be hard. Life is never easy. Izuku moved on to the body of the badger. People with flashy quirks have it easy, Shinso grumbled. Flashy. What does that mean? People with quirks that are strong and attention-grabbing, like yours I guess. Yours isn't strong. I guess it is but it's not attention-grabbing. Why do you want to grab people's attention? Is that good for being a hero? Bone crunched as Izuku bit into the ribs. Shinso winced at the sound of bone crunching. Not exactly, it's just easier. Then work hard, that's all that's left. Izuku shrugged. Shinso nodded and finished his dinner. He twirled the bone and thought about what he should do. You going to eat that? Izuku pointed to the bone in Shinso's hands and he handed it to the feral boy. Shinso got up after Izuku finished eating and he looked around to head home. Izuku. Yeah. Izuku was stretching lazily on the ground. How do I get back home? With his eyes closed, Izuku pointed in a direction and said. If you get lost, just shout. Alright, I'll see you around. And he made his way through the dark woods with his flashlight and a full belly. A year passed with not much changing. Izuku kept reading about the basics of heroes and continued his studies. Asato returned from her vacation on time and everything continued as usual. Shinso visited every once in a while and Izuku hunted for both of them. Bit by bit, Shinso got a bit more muscle added to his body. Shinso gave him the idea of trying to mimic quirks as he has been with his physical body. That made Izuku go into a learning frenzy and dove deep into quirk biology. Some quirks were out of the question like teleportation and being able to control fire. For that, he would have to dissect a quirk user with that capability to figure out how it works. As for others like mutations of the body, he already did that and much more efficiently than the book said. In the end, he wasn't able to mimic the emitter quirks. He liked the idea of his style and not being a MSTR of none-type fighter. So, what do I do so I can go to UA? Izuku asked one day with Shinso. You still haven't applied. Of course, you haven't. Let me show you. Shinso moved over and pulled out his laptop from his bag. From there he pulled the website for UA and began a new application and then handed it over to Izuku. He paused and asked him a question. You know how to use a computer, right? Izuku furrowed his brows and answered. Of course I do, I've used one like 6 times. He scoffed. Shinso rolled his eyes and stayed near just in case he needed help. Once done with filling out his application, Izuku handed it back to Shinso. He looked it over with raised eyebrows. You're missing like half of the info that they asked for. Izuku shrugged and Shinso hesitated before applying and then with a ding, it was approved. Great. What now? Izuku asked. In a month, we head over to UA and do a written exam and then the practical. And I just remember that you've never been to the city proper. I'll come to get you 28 days from now in the early morning and we head there together. Shinso proposed for Izuku. Sure, that sounds great. Should I get a good pelt? Or shirt and shorts be fine? He asked. Normal clothes, no pelts. And be sure to clean off good. Shinso gestured to his den where his stolen clothes were kept neatly in the corner. Are there any rules I should know of? Shinso thought of the countless rules a feral teen should probably know. Just do what I do and I'll probably be fine. He hoped, he said to himself. Time passed by as Izuku kept his usual routine. He told Asato about the UA entrance exam and when he will be gone for the day. She gave him good luck and Izuku went to his den for the night. He went on his hunt and filled his belly for tomorrow. Izuku woke up to the sound of breaking twigs in a pattern. It was Shinso who decided to make himself known every time he stepped into the woods. The last time he didn't and spooked Izuku, he was almost impaled by Izuku's bone spear. Izuku. Time to go, we have like 15 minutes before it's late. Shinso shouted, knowing Izuku could hear him from a distance. Izuku got out of his den and stretched with multiple joints cracking. He transformed into his hunter form and Shinso caught him before he leapt off. Hurry up. We don't have much time. Shinso said. Izuku bolted and searched for his meal. He wanted to be full just in case something bad happened in the city. He found what he was looking for and didn't stop as he impaled the deer and began to devour it in a hurry. Tendrils sprouted out of his back and chest and did their parts to consume the deer. Izuku sprinted back to his den and went to the pond to wash off quickly. His body took in any water left on his skin and then moved to his den. He set his prize with the others and changed into his nicest shorts and shirt. He just stole them last week. Shinso waited and Izuku emerged from the hole in the ground. He nodded at his appearance and stopped. Did you steal that? Yeah, just last week. Izuku said proudly. Don't steal things and especially in the city. Alright. Let's go. Shinso rubbed his nose at the future headache coming. Izuku followed Shinso into the city and he was like a tourist on vacation with how much he looked around with awe in his eyes. Shinso had to drag him away multiple times to keep on schedule. He observed more people than he had ever seen before. While it was loud, he could mute his hearing some. And the same with his nose. They stepped onto a platform with many people waiting and then the train arrived and Izuku watched every facet of what was going on. He stepped into the metal tube with many people and it began to move. He watched all the building flash by as Izuku looked out the window of the train. Shinso was kinda jealous of the feral boy to see everything in a new light. They got close to their stop and UA was visible. Shinso tapped Izuku's dense arm and pointed at the building. The train stopped and many people got off. Izuku stuck close to Shinso and they walked to the gates of UA. Many people with a myriad of quirks and appearances walked in the same direction and Izuku took it all in. You ready? Shinso asked. For what? Izuku asked confused. Does the fight start immediately? Izuku raised his hands to change but Shinso covered them. No. Just, forget it, and let's go. Shinso groaned. Nature hits back. Izuku walked with Shinso through the gates of UA and followed the others into the doors leading to the main building. Izuku wasn't paying attention to where he was going and his foot caught a loose brick. Normally, someone would trip and fall over. But given Izuku's dense muscles and steel-covered bones, the brick shattered. Izuku looked down and saw the missing brick and something slide down. Whoa, are there metal worms? Imma, grab it. Izuku's hand shifted and steel blades tipped his fingers. He caught the thick metal worm thing. What are you doing? Shinso whispered, yelled as he pulled Izuku's shoulder. He saw what the feral boy had in his hand and stopped. Why is a hydraulic under there? Ah, forget it, and let's go. But the worm. Izuku whined. It's not a worm or alive. Shinso almost shouted as he pushed the extremely heavy boy. They walked in and to a table where they were directed. Izuku looked around and he wasn't the only one as he followed Shinso to the room they were told to go. Hundreds of desks were spread out and Izuku was directed to sit next to Shinso. Alright, when the exam starts. Don't look at others' exams or you fail. Don't make loud noise or you get in trouble. Don't speak to me or anyone else unless they are a hero or you will get in trouble. Understood. Shinso rattled off and Izuku listened carefully. Got it. He nodded dutifully. Is the test going to be on paper? Because I haven't written anything in years. Shinso gave out a keening sound like a bird behind squeezed and its lungs are expelling air. Just try your best, alright. He gave Izuku a shaky smile. Everyone be seated, the UA Heroics exam will begin in a moment. The man with the domed helmet and with eyes and mouth on the helmet said. He went on to explain the rules of the exam and they were similar to what Shinso said. He opened his mouth and multiple copies of himself handed out the test and the pencils. Izuku held the pencil like he was going to stab something and he looked at Shinso. He adjusted his grip to copy the purple-haired boy and began his exam. Ectoplasm wandered around as he checked for any cheaters. He had found 2 and they already failed without them realizing it. He paused when he saw a green-haired boy having difficulty writing with the pencil. He observed the boy for a moment with his back to Ectoplasm. He paused and a black bead grew out of his neck and then he continued to write. Once Ectoplasm moved on, the bead was sked back in and the boy continued his messy handwriting. Izuku was one of the last ones in the exam to leave. He shifted the muscles in his hands and they relaxed from the position they were stuck in. Shinso sat near the end of the hall waiting for Izuku to finish. How'd it go? He asked. I knew the answers but it's been a while since I've held a pencil or whatever. Izuku stood next to the seated boy. They made their way to a large sitting room and they found a pair of open seats. After everyone sat down, a blond man walked out with a weird hairdo. The man shouted and Izuku immediately didn't like him from his loud voice. The hero went on to explain the exam and what their objective will be. It was pretty straightforward, destroy robots and get points. You will have to find the bus with the city center A on the side, Shinso explained to Izuku as he pointed out the different areas he will be needed to go to. And you too. If you think of this as a joke then leave. A boy further down pointed to Izuku and Shinso. What was the joke? Izuku asked without hesitation. The room bubbled with scattered laughter and that made Izuku even more confused. What joke? He turned to Shinso and he just patted his shoulder and the hero continued. They all split off to different areas and Izuku wandered the long row of buses until he found the one with a large A on the side. Many people were already aboard and Izuku stepped on. The bus shifted at his weight and Izuku sat in an empty seat. After a little bit, the bus began to drive away and Izuku felt some nerves CRP up. Not at the test itself but being alone in a foreign area like the city. He much preferred the forest to the smell of the city. They got off and many began to stretch and prepare for the exam to being. A blond boy approached Izuku and he greeted him. Hello, my name is Nito Monoma. My quirk is copy and it allows me to copy other quirks for a short time. Could I ask if yours would be viable? He asked. I'm Izuku, I'm not sure my quirk will be the best for you. It took a lot of research to make it work to its fullest. It allows me to control my body down to its cells. Although, I first learned how to use it to heal me by command. Anything else takes fuel. He explained. Monoma looked interested in the quirk but shook his head. You're right, need too much control to use properly. Thank you for your time and I wish you good luck. He walked off and introduced himself to the next person. I wonder what would have happened if he copied my quirk and changed his body. Would it stay? It reverts to now. He daydreamed as everyone prepared. Izuku shook it off and took his shirt off lest he rips it. He hopes his shorts survive because he had no extra clothes on him and he was still going commando. Start. Everyone looked up at the voice. What are you waiting for? There is no countdown in real life. Izuku turned and transformed into his hunter form and he heard shouts of fear and panic as Izuku disappeared and sprinted into the fake city. He jumped over many people and kept running at a blistering speed. He found his first target as he ran straight. It was a one-pointer and Izuku impaled it through the chest. It died and Izuku observed it while holding it up. Others caught up to the beast and ran around him with a wide BRTH. Izuku took in the scent of the oil and paint. With that, he tosses the robot to the side like trash after tearing its head off and having a tendril hold it. The faculty watched many screens as the exam started. Nizu watched one screen in particular of a boy with little to no information on his application. A background search found nothing and his abilities worry the principal. Ectoplasm. Was that the boy you marked as odd? The hero looked up and turned to Izuku, tearing a three-pointer in half and then taking its head. Now, 3 robot heads hung behind the beast, one of each robot variation. I'm not sure, he looks different. Nizu brought up the camera footage right before the exam started. Yep, that's him. Why are you so intrigued? Other than his powerful quirk, that is. Aizawa asked. Because he doesn't exist in the system. All that was put on his application was one name, where to send the letter, and what course he wanted to apply. I did a background check on Izuku and he doesn't exist in the system. No school records, no police records, and no quirk records. Nizu watched as he tore apart robot after robot like an actual beast. It was instinct driving the boy showed. What are we going to do? Midnight asked. We grade him first and pass or fail we talk to him, Nizu ordered. Should I participate? Small Might asked. I see no harm in it. Nizu didn't take his eyes off the screen with Izuku slicing heads off robots and growing a shield of something to block rockets launched at him. Izuku felt the heat of the rockets hit and he sprinted full tilt at the larger robot. He speared its head and Izuku tore it off and then threw the head at a one-pointer. The projectile tore through its chest and the robot stopped moving. The eyes on his back spotted a new target and Izuku leaped toward it. The two-pointer struck with its tail and Izuku twisted around it as he slashed it off and then impaled it with its limb. It was quiet for all of a second, then a large figure emerged from the city center. Izuku watched as others ran away from the zero-pointer. It towered over many buildings as it crashed closer to the exit. His ears picked up on a cry for help and Izuku dashed forward. He found a pink girl with horns trying to splash something on the stone, pinning her legs down. She went pale as she saw Izuku's monstrosity of a body sprinting right to her. Izuku didn't waste time and threw off the stone with little difficulty and gingerly picked up the girl after his hands shifted to normal. He scooped her up and sprinted back to safety. He set her down gently and looked at the zero-pointer's head. He gently set his other trophies next to the pink girl and sprinted at the large robot. He heard the shouts of shock but Izuku wanted to take it down. With a feral grin, the hunter leapt at its legs and began to climb them with frightening speed. His claws gouged out handholds with every leap until he reached its chest and began to burrow his way inside. He began to rip apart anything he saw. Cables were slashed, gears smashed, and the glowing panel was speared. The last one did it and Izuku felt the robot stop and began to explode. He put up his shield of dense keratin. He felt pain in his side and then he was launched out of the opening he created. Izuku landed HRD on the concrete. He absorbed the shredded shield and turned it back into mass for his body. Then he shifted back to his usual self and sat up. His back was already healed but the piece of shrapnel sticking out of his lungs was not. I forgot to reinforce between the ribs so exactly this didn't happen, stupid. He grabbed the shrapnel and yanked it out. He heard shouts of shock as Izuku held the sharp piece of metal. Trophy, nice. He nodded and looked up. A small old lady was hurrying towards him and began to examine his closed wound. Izuku focused inward and felt no foreign entities in his body. Yep, this was all of it. Who are you? A hero. You DMN fool, you could have died. She hit her cane on his leg but it was like it hit a solid wall. Why did you hit me? Izuku was beginning to dislike the old woman. For doing something idiotic. She waved her cane in his face. Should I do the same if I ever see someone do something idiotic? You hit me with your full strength, should I do the same? Izuku loomed over the diminutive woman and asked with full seriousness. Recovery girl stepped back at the shifting body of the boy. Izuku watched her for another moment and waited for an answer but none came. Izuku turned and left to claim his trophies. He found the pink girl he got out from under the stone and next to her were the 3 robot heads. Nice. Glad to see you're alright. He picked up the 3 heads and headed to the exit. Good luck or whatever. Everyone was quiet as they watched the odd boy carry 3 robot heads and a piece of shrapnel that impaled him not long ago. Izuku made his way back to the bus's left and waited for Shinso to arrive. He got many odd stares when they passed him but Izuku didn't pay much attention to them. Izuku caught Shinso's smell and then saw him walk through the exit. Izuku waved at him with a smile and Shinso smiled slightly back. He furrowed his brow at the things he held. Why do you have those? Trophies. You did good. He asked. He shook his head with a chuckle. I think so. Izuku noticed a man in a dark outfit and white scarf approaching the two. Izuku turned to the scraggly-haired man and stared at him until he stopped near Izuku and Shinso. Izuku. Please come with me. The man said. What did you do? Shinso asked horrified. If I don't. Izuku ignored Shinso and stared at the man. He raised his eyebrow at Izuku. Then I'll drag you with me. It's illogical to waste any more time. Izuku caught a glimpse of some goggles around the white fabric and faint lines where he wore them frequently. Not until you tell me why. The area was emptied of teens and all that was left was a nervous Shinso and the two of them staring at each other. The man gave out a long sigh and closed his eyes. The principal wishes to speak with you about your application. Is that reason enough? He turned to stare at Izuku. Oh, that's all, sure I don't mind. Come on, Shinso. He waved the purple-haired boy to follow. Izuku waited for the man to show them the way. The man stared at him curiously. Izuku blinked vertically just to have fun. Follow me. The man didn't bat an eye. They walked silently as they made their way upstairs and to a confident room with some heroes by his estimation. The nervous energy Shinso was giving confirmed it. Izuku observed each one of the heroes. His eyes lingered on the skinny blonde and then the rodent in clothes. Which one is the principal? He asked Shinso. Shinso whined softly and nodded to the white-haired rodent. He is. So, what's this about? That guy said about my application. What about it? Izuku asked bluntly. The heroes gave a variety of reactions as Izuku didn't bow or show any sort of respect to any of them, most found it odd. Vlad King grunted in disapproval and Snipe chuckled. Hound Dog gave the oddest reaction as he lowered his head and kept his eyes low. Nizu's fur was standing on end as Izuku's eyes locked onto his. Yes, your application had many blanks, and when I tried to look into you, well, you didn't exist. Can you give us more information? Nizu said steadily. Sure, I don't mind. Ask away. Izuku shrugged. Shinso looked at him incredulously. He caught the look and asked. What's with that face? I thought you didn't want to talk about your past. His voice pitched. You just never asked after the first night. I thought you never cared is all. He shrugged and Shinso threw his hands in the air. He turned back to the rodent. What's your full name? Izuku Midoriya, just call me Izuku. Where do you live? The address you gave was for a library. Near him. He pointed at Shinso. They looked to Shinso and he gave a glare at Izuku. He told them his address and district. Yeah, about a 10-minute walk from there into the woods. There's my den. Izuku said. Everyone's ears perked up at that. Den, explain please. Nizu had a feeling already. I live in a den in the woods, that's all there is to it. He shrugged. Alone. Hound Dog didn't look up when he asked. They all gave him odd looks, but Nizu understood. Yep, Shinso walked into my territory when he was running away from bullies almost 2 years ago, I think. I am bad with time. He visits me every once in a while when he gets bored or his mom makes him go out. How'd you know that? Izuku ignored him and waited for more questions. Why are you living in the woods? Vlad King asked the question in everyone's mind. Long or short? Izuku asked. Long if you would, Nizu spoke. Well, when I was 5. My mother took me to a doctor to check my quirk since it was taking too long. He said I was quirkless and my mother didn't like that. She dove me far and then dumped me in the middle of the woods to die. Turns out, I'm pretty good in the forest. It was hard at first when I had to eat raw fish, but I managed. When I was 7 is when stuff got interesting. A wolf tried to eat me. I didn't let it and killed it. Granted, it mangled my arm and I broke my leg, but I beat it. Anyways, I wake up later and my injuries are healed and I have a quirk. I ate the wolf and learned what my quirk did. I can manipulate my body down to its cells. It hurts a lot at first, but I learned to deal with it. I wanted to do more with my quirk, so I made my way to the city and then to a library. From there I caught up with school, learned anatomy for my quirk, and met Shinso. Pretty great so far. Anything else? He looked around to see the horrified faces of both teachers and Shinso. What's with that face? He asked Shinso. Shinso didn't say anything and hugged Izuku. Ah, what are you doing? Shinso tightens his hug. I mean, it's nice and all. What is your mother's name? Nizu asked. Inko Midoriya, I think. You've been eating well? Midnight asked. Oh yeah, I hunt every night. Your food is bland as hell and need more vegetables in your diet. Shinso let go of his friend and wiped his face. You just make it spicy, Izuku grumbles. Well, that's all we need for the time being. But we can't in good conscience leave you alone. I would like to make you a ward of UA. Nizu said and many nodded their agreement. What does that mean? Izuku asked suspiciously. UA becomes your home and we provide all you need to live. UA becomes your parent. Nizu explained. Can I leave whenever? As long as I am made aware, yes. I don't want to live in the building, woods only. We have a large stretch of woods to our south. We can get wild prey brought in for your comfort, but you will have to learn how to eat with the rest of us. Izuku thought about it and observed each one of the heroes present. Why do you care? We are heroes, it's our job to care, and even if it wasn't, all of us would have done something to help, Nizu explained, and the seated heroes nodded their agreement. Does that mean I passed the exam? Izuku smiled. Yes, in first place for the practical. Nizu grinned. Alright, I'll let UA buy my parent. But only if Shinso finds out if he passes. He pointed at the shocked boy. No, I can wait. His mouth was covered by a tendril from Izuku's shoulder. He passed and will be placed in 1A with you, Nizu said, and the heroes laughed at the boy's antics. Why me? Aizawa groaned. Shinso was smiling to himself and Izuku clapped him on the back. Also, I need to get my things from my den. That can be arranged. Midnight and Aizawa go with him and help him, Nizu ordered the two. Aizawa grumbled and got up. Midnight smiled at the two boys and went to change. Aizawa walked them out and headed to the parking lot. Nizu and Hound Dog sagged as Izuku left the room. What was that, Ryo? You didn't even look up once. Vlad asked him. My animal instincts were telling me there was an apex predator present and I shouldn't look at him lest I offend them. I don't know how Nizu managed it. He explained with little growls. It wasn't easy, Nizu rubbed his snout. Moving Izuku and Shinso walked behind Aizawa. Is he a hero? He doesn't look like it. Izuku turned to Shinso. Shinso cringed at the loud voice. I think he's an underground hero. Those are heroes that work at night mainly and stay away from the limelight. You're correct, Aizawa said back. Oh. Shinso, that would be right up your alley with your quirk. Izuku continued to observe Aizawa. Kid, I can feel your eyes on me. Please stop looking at me like your next meal. Aizawa gave a minuscule shiver. Oh, sure I'll stop. Izuku turned to Shinso. Did I ever do that to you? He waved his concerns away. Only at first. They walked into the sunlight and to a parking lot. Aizawa stopped and turned to Izuku. How much stuff do you have? Which car would be the best? He gestured to the cars parked. Izuku hummed and looked at the options. He ran up to a few and peered inside. This one or that one probably. He pointed to a pickup truck or the SUV. I want to drive the truck. Midnight came out in civilian clothes and sporting a smile. Ooh. That's your normal clothes and your hero clothes are put away. Izuku turned to Aizawa. Midnight burst out laughing and Shinso didn't know what to do but stood there stock still. No kiddo, that's his hero clothes. Call me Namuri Kayama when you see me like this. Either name is fine. She grabbed keys from a box on the wall and turned to them. The four boarded the truck and when Izuku stepped in, the truck dipped significantly. They looked at him in surprise. Dense muscles and steel-covered bones. He said by explanation, the UA's staff didn't change their expressions. They drove and Shinso gave the address to his house. Izuku nervously tightened his hold on his trophies as they drove. Shinso noticed first and looked worriedly. You alright, Izuku? I don't think I like driving in cars like this, Izuku said. The rest thought of the last time he was a passenger in a car. So Izuku, what do you usually do during the day? She tried to change the subject and distract him. Nothing much, go to the library and read most of the day. When Asato closes, I head to my den and then hunt for dinner. The deer have been getting farther and farther away from my den. I think they finally figured out where I live. But it's a fun hunt to track them down. Shinso comes over sometimes and I hunt something for the both of us. What do you read at the library? Aizawa asked in curiosity. Human and animal anatomy. Quirked human anatomy, quirked animal anatomy, and recently about heroes. One hero asked me why I wasn't in school and that got me thinking about heroes. You read all that for your quirk? Namuri asked. Yep. Needed to know how to improve my body for better hunting, I guess now for better being a hero. What all did you do? Aizawa asked skeptically. He was worried about what the feral boy did to his body. A lot, I started with my bone and muscles. Bones I strengthened with calcium, iron, and carbon, they are coated in steel. Muscles I compressed time and time again. Ligaments were strengthened, organs were made more spongy for impact, added more support for my brain stem, and added a net of sorts was to prevent brain injuries. Made my spine more flexible and added more neurons connecting throughout my body for better reaction time. Externally, added features of animals to my nose, eyes, and ears. I think that's all. Oh right. I have to add something between the ribs so this guy. He waved the. Can't get through there again. The truck was quiet as they took in what Izuku had done to his body. That's quite extensive. Did anyone help you with that? Namuri asked. Not much. Asato gave me the books I could find and I did the rest. Shinso gave me the idea of adding organs that some quirked people have, but I would need to see one up close. But I'm pretty happy with what I've got. Izuku shrugged, casually mentioning finding out how quirks work and adding them to himself. This Asato, she works at the library. Namuri changed the subject again. Yep, she owns it I think. She's nice and helpful, I see her almost every day. She doesn't know you live in the woods? Namuri asked. She never asked and I never said. I think she thinks I'm homeless, that's kinda wrong I guess. So it's alright if I tell Mom my friend is a feral boy in the woods? Shinso asked. I never told you to keep it a secret. Izuku enjoyed the feeling of Shinso calling him his friend. Well, that could have been nice to know. Shinso scoffed in annoyance. They soon arrived in front of the Shinso household. Everyone got out and Izuku sniffed the air to get his bearing. A woman with straight purple hair came out of the house they stopped at and Shinso turned to smile nervously at her. Hey Mom, Shinso said. Toshi, what's going on? She raised an eyebrow at her son. Not much, I passed the exam. He tried to distract her. She pulled him into a hug with a smile. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. She pulled back and held him at arm's length away. Now, what's going on? She said seriously. Your son's friend was a feral boy living in the woods. He took the exam with Hitoshi and Yue took note of Izuku. We asked him a few questions and now Izuku is becoming a ward of Yue for his well-being. Aizawa explained in short. What? She was shocked at the revelation. You guys go on and I'll explain it better. He glared at Aizawa who was rubbing his arm from Namuri's punch. Izuku waved at Hitoshi's mom with a smile and walked between the neighboring house and theirs to the backyard. Namuri and Aizawa followed him and they walked to the forest. Shinso had made a bit of a trail already but Izuku extended a tendril with a blade on the end and cut his way through to make it easier for the two adults. Aizawa was extremely aware of the danger the teen before himself posed. He felt it when the boy locked eyes with him for the first time. And he felt it more when the boy was surrounded by seasoned heroes. While Izuku was human, he was truly a beast. They arrived in a clearing that had the faint scent of BLD and musk in the air. There was a fire pit that looks like it's been used daily. A pond not far with a path worn down by its frequent visits. And in the middle of the clearing, against a tree, was a hole in the ground. The tree has been clawed once to show its territory. Here we are. Izuku said happily. I'll grab by things. He left the exam robot heads and dove into the hole. Need any help, Izuku? Namuri asked from the hole. Sure. Here, put this next to the others. Izuku placed a perfectly presented deer skull with large antlers on its bone-white skull. Namuri paled just a bit and gently it next to the robot heads. Oh, they're trophies. She said softly in realization. More skulls were thrown out of the hole without much care except for a few. Notably one, in particular, a canine skull wore more than the others. He walked out carrying it with his tendrils and in his hands was a large roll of animal furs. Aizawa saw furs from deer and badger to wolf and fox. Namuri and Aizawa stared at the pile of skulls and then at the large furs Izuku held. The boy's arms split and the furs were held on his back while his arms reformed back to whole. It was extremely disturbing to hear the bone crack and flesh rip while his body changed. Izuku hummed and began to sift through the skulls. He examined each one, some were gently set next to the robot and deer skulls. Others were eaten without much care. The bigger ones were broken down with some tendrils and consumed by retracting the tendril back into his body. Aizawa and Namuri watched the whole process with a bit of horror in their eyes, more in Namuri's than Aizawa's. "Ah, Izuku. Why are you saving some and not the others?" Namuri finally asked. "They aren't important enough, like these are just day-to-day hunts. Nothing impressive except for a few. The wolf skull is the one that tried to kill me and the day I found my quirk. I went back for it a few years ago. This badger was the first time I shared a meal with Shinso. That deer has nothing special about it, but it looks nice, although it tried to fight back. Not very well, as you can see," he explained as he finished. "And the furs?" Aizawa asked. "My bed." Izuku smiled up at them. "Is that everything?" Namuri asked. Izuku thought for a moment and then extended a tendril and grabbed something. On the tendril, which split once, was a bundle of clothes and his black stone rock. He had long identified it as obsidian. While it became obsolete, it was nice to keep. "Where did you get those clothes? Shinso give them to you?" Namuri asked as she took them from him to help. "No, I stole them. I think this one is even Shinso's," he admitted without any shame. Aizawa sighed. "No more stealing things, all right. If you want something, then ask or pay for it." "I'll try." Izuku shrugged and Aizawa knew that would be a problem in the future. They walked back to the truck with Aizawa and Namuri carrying some trophies to help Izuku. They loaded everything in the back and Shinso came out to see him off. "You can have my den if you want. It'll still be mine if I ever return, but you can use it," Izuku offered. "Gee, thanks." He drawled out and rolled his eyes. "I'll see you in classes, I guess." "Yep. I'll see you in when do classes start?" Izuku turned to the adults. "A month." Aizawa drawled. "In a month, don't die. And if those people came after you again, tell me." His voice turned serious and he stared into his friend's eyes. The two heroes got shivers when they saw his eyes. Shinso, on the other hand, looked nonplussed. "I'll be fine, take care of yourself." Izuku nodded and then remembered about Asato. "I still need to say goodbye to Asato." He turned to Namuri and Aizawa. "Get in, we'll drive you there." Namuri smiled at him. They drove a few minutes away and to a smaller library compared to what Aizawa and Namuri have seen. Izuku got out and walked in without hesitation. Namuri followed a few steps behind and Aizawa decided to stay in the truck. "Izuku. How did the exam go?" Asato greeted her favorite reader softly as usual. "Pretty good. The teacher wanted to talk to me about my application since it didn't have much information, and they decided to make me a ward of UA." Izuku smiled brightly. Asato smiled sadly at Izuku. "So you were homeless. I knew there was something, but I saw you fed well and decently happy. I chose not to pry." "Not homeless, I had my den. I lived in the woods, it's nice and quiet. I was alright." Izuku shrugged. "Denver. In the woods. For how long?" She furrowed her brows. "Always, well, when I turned around 5. "What?" "Izuku, please explain." She motioned to a chair at Izuku's usual table and Izuku sat. "My mother didn't like that I was quirkless and left me in the middle of the woods. I managed to survive and at 7 I found my quirk. From there it became easier. I came here to learn anatomy to better my quirk and now I'm here." He shorted the story. Asato looked saddened at the story and turned to Namuri. You are with UA. Are they going to find his mother and arrest her for what she had done? Yes, my boss is already working on it. Namuri nodded firmly. Well, I'm glad everything is working out for you. Please take care of yourself, Izuku. She got up and embraced the boy. I'll come to visit when I can. He hugged her gently. It's been a long time since he's been embraced in this fashion, and tears cropped up at the corner of his eyes. Take care of the boy. Asato looked to Namuri and wiped tears away. I'll do my best, Namuri said seriously. They boarded the truck and they drove off to UA as the sun set. They arrived at UA without much trouble and they walked Izuku and his things inside. Hound Dog greeted them. Hello, my name is Hound Dog or Ryo Inui. I'll be showing you to the woods. I am in charge of the security perimeter of the woods. Hound Dog kept his eyes low when he spoke to Izuku. He did manage to flick his eyes up once but set them down again and took a minuscule step back. Okay, thank you Namuri for your help. Aizawa, you didn't help much but thanks anyway. Namuri snorted and covered her mouth. Aizawa's eye twitched. Don't get lost. He kept his monotone voice. Izuku smiled brightly and waved at them goodbye. He followed Ryo to a back door and an open field stretched in front of them and then a tree line. They walked in silence as Izuku took in the new environment. His eyes flicked to the Dogman hybrid and he could see the hero's shoulder tense. You're afraid of me, why? Izuku could smell it. You are an apex predator to the highest degree. Even if you are a child, my instincts are telling me to run. Ryo answered with low growls. Oh, I didn't know. I never met someone with an animal quirk. Would it help if I said that I have no intention of hurting you? It does help, yes. His shoulder relaxed more but he never raised his eyes to meet Izuku's. What do you have with you? Trophies. And my furs, some clothes I stole, and my obsidian knife. Izuku proffered the glass knife for Ryo to see. He took it gently and examined it in the fading light. I used it before I got my quirk, the wrapping is my shorts when I was 5. That helped me kill this guy or girl, I never checked. He held up the wolf skull with a cracked eye socket where the obsidian hit. Did you enjoy it? The woods. The hunt. Ryo handed back the obsidian knife. Izuku nodded. It's nice and quiet. The hunt is thrilling. But I was curious about being a hero so I came with Shinso to try. Do you hunt? Ryo nodded his head. Rarely, the small game in the forest. He nodded to the tree line they were near now. Where is your territory? I'll avoid it. Izuku took in the scent of the forest. It's only mine by name. This is yours now, I will be a visitor if I step in here now. Ryo shook his head. You are free to come and go. I will not stop you. Ryo huffed a laugh. That helps too. Here, this is a device if Nizu ever asks for you. It will beep and vibrate and all you need to do is push the button and there will be two-way communication. We will get you a proper phone in the future. He handed Izuku a black box the size of his thumb. Izuku took it and looked at it from every angle. He set it against his forearm and it sunk slightly into his flesh. There, now I won't lose it. Ryo nodded. Call me if you need anything. Izuku nodded and he walked into the darkening forest. Bone cracked and flesh tore as Izuku shifted. He took in the odors from the surrounding and ran with his things on his back. Ryo shivered as the boy left his range. He understood that Izuku wouldn't hurt anyone without reason but his animal side of him wanted to bare his neck in subservience. He was no longer at the top of the food chain, Izuku was. He knew that would cause problems with other students but they will have to deal with them as they came. Izuku's new forest was large but nothing compared to where he grew up, it will do. Izuku ran from one corner of the forest where a wall was, to the other corner. He grew a thick tail to balance his fast-paced run as Izuku took in every foot of the new terrain. He saw some prey but he will hold off until he found where he will make his home. He stopped at a large pond with fish swimming in it. It was deep and clear water. Izuku drank from it and decided near the pond will be good. He began to walk around the pond for a suitable spot. He found a few decent spots but it wasn't good enough. Then he found a thick tree with hanging branches that could shade the base entirely if the sun was out. Izuku rumbled in approval and began to dig. He made sure not to damage the roots of the tree as he dug. His hands shifted into shovels and he scooped handfuls of dirt a second. The ground around the entrance was packed tightly and so were the walls of the interior. He looked around at his den and felt like it was missing something. His stuff was outside as he worked on his new home. He climbed out and found a tree. His arms shifted into axe blades and he chopped the tree down in 2 earth-shaking swings. He removed the branch and had one straight log. His tendrils did quick work taking off the bark and then he split the log into planks. Once that was done he brought a few planks inside and set them as shelves and a solid surface for his furs. Izuku set all his things inside and gave out a satisfied nod. His trophies were set on the shelves and his furs were on the thick planks he brought in. He left the den and shaped the entrance to prevent rain from getting in. The spare planks he used to tie together and make a door that covered the entrance. He put his signature of 3 claw marks on the outside and then went out to hunt. The deer was healthy and it filled him after a long day. We went to sleep on his furs with a content smile.